My name is Mark Kingwell, and I'm here to talk about play. What I want to try to do is show you why play is the essence of life, in fact, is the most important of our human possibilities, and that the city is the place where play happens best. In a sense, the city is time. We rush to appointments. We are on highways and streets and offices. We go from one place to another. We have our schedules, our filofaxes, if you're old school like me, our iPhones with our schedules, places we have to be, times at which we have to be there. The city is organized and run by time. It is a series of timed abstractions and transactions. But play is timelessness. Play is the transcendence of time. Why do we play? What is it to play? Well, one answer is that we play in order to socialize. Animals do it. They send a message when they fight that it's not really a fight. The message is that this is simulated. I may be biting you, but I'm not really biting you. Children do it too. This is not, in fact, a picture of me and my two brothers. But it could easily be. In fact, if it were, we would not be posing or mugging for the camera in this. We would probably actually be trying to strangle each other. And that limit, where you don't really know until it's too late when you've gone too far, is part of why we play. We play to learn precisely those limits. We sometimes play for a purpose. And one example, I'm going to give you two. One example is what's called brainstorming. So we play in our workplaces in order to free up creativity. And many people think that this is a good idea. Other people think differently. Nice little mind map there. Sometimes we play, and I'm going to use these toothbrushes because I couldn't show you an image of Foreplay that wasn't a little bit too much. But Foreplay is another kind of play that might be on the way to something else, the way that brainstorming is on the way perhaps to a new product or innovation. But just in the interest of trying to distill the essence of play, I'm going to quote here a sex manual from 1937, which happily is called Happier Love by the Dutch expert Van der Decken. And Van der Decken has this to say about foreplay. As its name implies, foreplay is preludial to, that just means before the game. It's not actually, it's L-U, not L-E-W. Preludial to the act of sexual intercourse and is to be considered and employed only in this light. Should foreplay come to be employed and practiced for its own sake, without direct reference to the act of sexual intercourse, which is to follow, then, to this degree, the participants have been engaged in an act of perversion. I invite you to reflect on Van der Decken the next time it's relevant in your life. Well, assuming that play is not just about socialization or on the way to something else like a new idea or sexual intercourse, what is the essence of play? Well, play is about pretending. It's about a displacement from reality, such that we see something that in, quote, real life is one thing, but in play is something else. Play is always ironic. It's always a displacement or a movement. Logically speaking, a philosopher like me would say, in play we are mentioning things rather than using them. Names, identities, ideas. Classically, we understand play as a double displacement from reality. The first displacement is to create something which is an imaginary representation of something real. So here, the gun is actually my fingers. So my fingers stand in for the gun. But notice, in play, the imaginary gun has to be displaced again, because I can actually threaten a real enemy or express real anger with an imaginary gun. So suppose on the street I do this sign with my fingers and point it at someone who has just cut me off on the street. That's expressing real anger using an imaginary gun. That's not playful. Right? The essence of play is that I should threaten an imaginary enemy with the imaginary gun. Right? To the enemy towards whom I feel only imaginary animosity. And it's that doubling, that double irony, if you like, that gets us close to the heart of what play is. Imaginary guns have their limits. And so too does play. Once we have identified this heart of play as the double irony or double displacement, we start to see some of the threats that are posed to play. The aggressive goal-oriented forms of play that so much are favored by weekend warriors of various kinds. Mountain climbing, triathlon racing, extreme or high-risk sports, but also the slightly crazed Saturday afternoon attempts to get through all the enjoyable leisure time activities that I have set myself for the weekend. Gardening, decorating, cooking, eating, socializing, all before sundown. Even the standard forms of urban dissolution, drinking and doing drugs, for example, or staying up late, are annexed to the peculiar rhetoric of achievement, a sort of Protestant ethic of play, creating the odd spectacle of apparently nonconformist or anti-establishment hipsters bragging to each other about how drunk or how stoned or how tired they are, making them, not unlike, surprisingly identical to, plaid sporting businessmen comparing golf handicaps. Other threats to play include the institutionalization of actually extraneous but ineradicable elements of a certain kind of game. Whatever your stance on hockey fighting, the reason hockey fighting is not actually institutionalized in the rules of hockey is because precisely it's not part of the game, and yet defenses of it happening always say it is part of the game. So how can something both be and not be part of the game? This very idea is a threat to the playful elements at the heart of that game of hockey. A similar kind of threat is the interiorization of play. So it's not just about being outdoors playing road hockey instead of playing video games, but the idea that play happens between me and a screen. And in fact, one of the things I noticed when I was doing some Google searching about images for this talk was if you just put play in your search engine, the most common image you'll get is this. Right? And the great thing about this is that one of the Walrus people said when he saw this image in my PowerPoint, he said that looked like an embedded video, and he kept trying to click on it, and nothing was happening. And then I said, no, it's just the image. I don't, These threats to play highlight and sharpen our awareness of what the issues are, it seems to me. One way of thinking about this is the distinction between finite and infinite games. Finite games are games that come to an end, like this. The vectors close down to a point of decision. And that's really interesting in lots of ways. We want outcomes in certain kinds of games. Sports is a perfect example. But finite games, precisely as the name implies, fall back into the threat of time. Even baseball, which is the most timeless of games and doesn't have a clock, comes to an end, comes to a decision. And decisions are in many ways not playful. They take the playful elements of human life and put them into a game situation that is by definition finite. What that closes down is the opening up of new possibilities. And the idea that there might be instead infinite games, games that are constantly opening up new possibilities, and any moment of decision is only temporary, is just a kind of node of future possibility, is, I think, a powerful idea to capture our sense of why play is important. It may be the case that the only truly infinite game is life itself. And this is what I want to put to you in conclusion. That there is a sense in which the only game that is worth playing is the game of your life and my life. And this captures for me the idea that is sometimes called the aesthetic imperative, that you should live your life as a work of art. And it links up nicely with the double ironies of play, because art, all art, involves the suspension of disbelief. Paint on a two-dimensional surface is not something. It is a representation of something. But we can fall into it anyway because we suspend our disbelief willingly. We accept that irony. And all that kind of art opens up for us this sense of creativity even when we're not ourselves visual artists. Art doesn't reduce to a proposition, but it has a message, and the message is live now, because that's all you have. And the philosopher Wittgenstein said this: if we take eternity to mean not infinite temporal duration, but instead timelessness, then eternal life belongs to those who live in the present. Our life has no end, in just the same way in which our visual field has no limits. True happiness is sublime stillness. It is the soul's dialogue with itself, the contemplation of calm existence without forethought or regret. There is no other immortality. To see a world in a grain of sand and heaven in a wild flower, to hold infinity in the palm of your hand and eternity in an hour. Actually, you don't even need an hour. You just need 6.5 minutes. Friends, players, artists, immortals, I salute you.